My name is Faith Whitmore. 3 years ago, if someone had looked at my life from the outside, they would have thought I was the luckiest woman in the area. I lived in an upscale neighborhood in North Scottsdale, Arizona, in a Mediterranean-style villa with a backyard view of the McDowell Mountains. My husband Jackson was a senior partner at a major commercial real estate firm, and I was the chief financial officer for a private hospital chain. People used to call us the golden couple, the kind of pair everyone wanted at their party, the picture-perfect example of a successful marriage. But glamour is the easiest thing to build, and the quickest way to suffocate someone. I didn't notice when I started to disappear. Maybe it was in our 3rd year of marriage, when Jackson began to casually suggest that I turn down promotions because the new role would require frequent travel. "Nothing matters more than our home, sweetheart," he'd say, kissing my forehead with such gentleness that I couldn't argue back. I always listened to him. Just like that, I slowly gave up every corner of my life to a man who seemed flawless. Jackson had a way of speaking that made every word sound like a command wrapped in sugar. He never raised his voice, but his stare could freeze a room if I did anything inappropriate. One day he said, "The 3rd blue dress you wore at the charity event didn't look very professional. Beige is the color of refined women." The next day I put the blue dress in the donation bin. He never forbade me from keeping in touch with old friends, but every time I texted Elisa, my close college friend, he looked displeased. "Is she doing okay? I heard she's been switching jobs a lot. That kind of negative energy isn't good for you." Gradually, I stopped sharing anything about my friends. They vanished from my life, one by one, as if they'd been erased from my planner for not fitting the image of the ideal wife. We had 2 bank accounts, one joint and one under my name. But Jackson always made the final call on large expenses. I remember the first time I bought a new laptop after a raise. He glanced at the receipt and let out a soft laugh, almost amused. "The old one was still working fine. You should have checked with me first. Would have saved the waste." From then on, I never dared to buy anything over $2,000 without asking first. And I worked in finance. I used to be decisive, unafraid to debate, and had a voice in every boardroom. Now I double-checked every text before hitting send, rehearsed every sentence in conversations, and second-guessed dinner seasoning in case it was a bit too salty. That caution seeped into every breath I took, and I no longer recognized the woman in the mirror. "Faith, did you remember to schedule the pool cleaner?" Jackson called from upstairs one Friday afternoon. After a long day and 3 hours of traffic beneath the Arizona sun, I had finally gotten home from work and hadn't even taken off my shoes. He answered softly, "I'll call first thing in the morning." A light sigh drifted down. "I mentioned it earlier this week. My colleagues are coming over Sunday. You know how important this partnership is." I bit my lip and carried my bag upstairs. He never yelled, but every time he spoke like that, I felt like I had just botched a critical report, and I always tried not to trouble Jackson again. The house we lived in had artificial birdsong every morning, marble floors cold as ice, and a wine cabinet filled with high-end labels, but I had never felt lonelier in the place we called home. For years I believed I had it all, but lately I wasn't so sure I had anything real. I still remember that afternoon. The sudden urge to steer the car toward home unannounced, for no clear reason. Just a lingering headache from a 3-hour meeting, plus the sharp afternoon sun that made my eyes sting. I sent a quick text to my assistant. "Peeting out early, please resend the budget draft tomorrow." Then I put away my phone and drove straight toward the villa we lived in. The house that once felt grounding, now echoed with emptiness. I had never gone home without notice. In 12 years of living together, I always shared my schedule with Jackson hour by hour. No one made me do it. It was just habit. Submission disguised as routine. My Tesla rolled to a stop on the stone driveway. Jackson's Range Rover wasn't out front, so I assumed he was still in a meeting, as scheduled. I entered the house in silence. The door was unlocked, and everything looked the same. I was about to head upstairs to change when I heard a sound. A woman laughing, definitely not the TV or smart speaker, real laughter, upstairs. I froze. The cold from the marble floor crept up my spine. Then a man's voice, deep, followed by a soft chuckle, then something murmured that made her laugh again, echoing through the open staircase. I had heard that voice thousands of times. But how long had it been since Jackson laughed like that, when he was with me? My body moved before I could think. I went up the stairs, barefoot, silent. My heart wasn't pounding. It was still, as if waiting to confirm what my mind already knew. The bedroom door was ajar, unlocked. All I had to do was tilt my head to see everything. On the bed I made every morning, white sheets, pillows neatly aligned, was my husband, Jackson. And a woman with long brown hair, bare-backed, curled up against him, laughing. A red dress draped over the chair. They hadn't noticed me. They were lost in a world where I didn't exist. I couldn't move, every part of me locked in place. 42 years old, a chief financial officer, in a $1 million villa, watching my husband cheat on me, in our own marriage bed. The woman turned just as Jackson leaned down to kiss her shoulder. A young face, likely not even 30. I stepped back, gently enough that the door made no sound as I pulled it closed. I walked out right then. The Arizona sky had turned unusually dark. Thick clouds cast shadows over the landscape. As I started the car, raindrops began to fall. Not hard, but cold and sudden, tapping quietly on the windshield, in the way I thought I would collapse. Or go insane. Of course it hurt. The betrayal, the lies, but at the same time I felt something else. A strange feeling I hadn't expected. A relief. Because the guessing was over. I didn't need to shrink myself to fit into his comfort anymore, or pretend that cruelty wrapped in politeness was love. That moment, alone in a rain-speckled parking lot under a moody sky, was when I knew I had reached the end of a chapter. And I had two choices: go back and pretend nothing happened, or move forward, barefoot, not knowing what came next. I didn't drive back to the office. I didn't go to my parents' house. I didn't call a friend. I booked a room at a boutique hotel in downtown Scottsdale, the one Jackson never took me to because the parking's a hassle. And the moment I stepped into the room, just big enough for one person, I locked the door, took off my shoes, dropped my bag, and let my body fall onto the unfamiliar bed that somehow felt unexpectedly peaceful. I didn't go back home that night. The next day I took 3 days off, telling HR that I needed to schedule a routine health check. I was always on time, always completed everything, and had never taken sudden leave. Just like I had never vanished from my schedule like that in the past 12 years. The debit card under my name began to be used in ways Jackson couldn't track. Each morning I withdrew the maximum daily amount and slowly transferred it into a new account I had just opened at a small bank on the east side of the city, a bank unaffiliated with the system where Jackson managed his investment assets. I didn't dare make transfers. Any online activity could be monitored. I wanted to turn myself into a faint trace in the system he once completely controlled. I scheduled an appointment with a divorce attorney named Miranda Ellison, recommended by a former colleague. She was around 40, sharp, quick-witted, and most importantly, had no ties to Jackson. The meeting lasted over 2 hours. I told her everything, from Jackson's betrayal to the feeling of being slowly eroded, layer by layer, in what seemed like a peaceful marriage. Miranda didn't look surprised. She just looked at me with calm, steady eyes. "Faith," she said, leaning slightly toward me, "what you've gone through isn't just betrayal. This is a form of coercive control. And if what you're saying is accurate, we don't just have grounds for divorce. We can build a strong case to protect your full rights, even seek damages." Miranda guided me on how to start collecting evidence in the most thorough and secure way possible. You can't show any signs that you know what's going on. He may react violently when he senses a loss of control. I knew that. I had seen that look in Jackson's eyes, cold, tightly restrained, but capable of shattering boundaries if pushed too far. And then, in the process of reclaiming my autonomy, I discovered something that made me shudder even more than what I'd witnessed in that bedroom. Jackson had been monitoring me. Not just in the knows my meeting schedule or checks the credit card bill kind of way, but actual surveillance. I discovered it while checking my old phone, the iPhone I used 2 years ago. It had several system apps I didn't remember ever installing. I brought it to someone I used to work with, Noah, an IT specialist from a hospital data project. After a few steps, he said, Faith, this is surveillance software. Someone's been tracking your location, messages, even calls. My throat went dry. I remembered the times I texted Elisa and Jackson, would call right after asking, "Are you okay?" Or the times I visited my mother and he'd show up with some excuse like, "Just passing through." "Can it be installed remotely?" I asked, gripping my bag strap. Noah shook his head. "It has to be installed manually, either by holding the device or having admin access to your iCloud." "Have you ever handed your phone to anyone to adjust settings?" The answer was Jackson, of course, the man who always set up my new phones for convenience, who once told me, "Don't change your email password too often, you'll just forget it." I left Noah's office with frozen hands. I felt sick. Back at the hotel, I began checking every personal device, my tablet, laptop, smartwatch, anything that could be compromised. I created a new email account, stored all evidence in a secure, isolated platform, completely separate from anything Jackson might access. During those days, I also reviewed every financial document, and I found one detail that left me sitting in silence for hours. The house I was living in wasn't under my name. I had contributed more than half of the down payment. Every month, I sent mortgage payments into our joint account, but the legal deed listed only Jackson's name. I called Miranda immediately. She paused for a moment, then said, "This is a classic example of financial control. We'll bring this up in the divorce case, but from now on, Faith, he can't know what you know. Every step you take must be one he doesn't see coming." I looked at myself in the hotel bathroom mirror. My eyes were sunken from lack of sleep, my lips cracked from the dry Arizona air. I didn't know where this would lead, but I knew one thing. I wasn't walking out of this marriage as a victim. It took me 3 days to make the list. Not a list of withdrawals, not legal documentation, but names, people Jackson had quietly pushed out of my life. People I once trusted, once loved, before I slowly became the safe version of myself he could manage with ease. The first name I wrote down was Elisa Monroe. We'd been best friends since college, both studied accounting, rented our first apartment together in Flagstaff after graduation. Elisa was one of my bridesmaids. But afterward, we started drifting apart. No fights, no clear reason, just every time I suggested a meetup, Jackson would say, "Are you sure? She always brings negative energy." And I'd listen. I sent Elisa a message. "I owe you an apology. If you still have even a little patience for this friendship, can we meet?" 3 minutes later, she replied, "Where are you staying? I'm coming." We met at a small cafe in the old arts district in Tempe. Elisa got there first, just as I remembered her. Long curly hair pulled to one side, eyes sharp and direct. I sat down, wrapped my hands around the coffee cup and said, "Jackson and some young woman, they slept together. In our bed." Elisa was silent for a few seconds, then replied without a hint of surprise. "I'm not shocked. Didn't you see you've been fading from your own life? I tried to hold on, but you started to feel like a shadow of yourself." "I know. And I need help." Elisa didn't ask anything else. She nodded. "So where do we start?" I pulled out my phone and scrolled down to the list I'd saved under the name Dinner Confidential. Next was Ellie Sanchez, a former colleague from my time at the Phoenix branch. She left the company after Jackson accidentally revealed she was job hunting to a partner, causing her to lose her position. Back then I believed Jackson when he said he was just being honest with upper management. But now I understood. He was eliminating anyone who encouraged independent thinking. Ellie agreed to meet. When I told her why, she wasn't angry. Her eyes paused on me, as if trying to reconcile the woman in front of her with someone she used to know. "You once told me, Jackson always knows what's best." I remember going home that day and crying, because you weren't the same person anymore. And now I need to do something Jackson never thought I'd dare to do, expose him. Then came Patricia Delaney, Jackson's ex-wife. They had a brief marriage early in his career. According to Jackson, Patricia cheated on him with her former boss, destroyed his ability to trust, and that's why he closed his heart until he met me. I believed him completely. But now, That story felt too polished to be true. It took me 2 days to find Patricia's email. When I wrote to her, I said only this: "I'm sorry if this message is unwelcome, but I'm Jackson's current wife, and I think I've just lived through what you once endured." Patricia replied 5 hours later, "I'll come. I still have things the court never got to see." The final list was longer than I expected. 8 people. 8 individuals Jackson had manipulated, dismissed, or hurt, and every one of them agreed to show up that night. I reserved a private room at a restaurant called the Ember Room, in a glass-walled space overlooking a man-made lake. I chose it for one reason only. Jackson had once said, "That room's too dark, not suitable for high-end clients." I smiled as I booked it. The chairs were set, the lighting low but deliberate, and the space between us wide enough for the truth to land. The Ember Room on Friday night carried a quiet chill, as if waiting for something to explode behind the soundproof glass and warm yellow light. I arrived 30 minutes early, wearing a deep charcoal satin dress, not because it was flattering, like Jackson once said, but because it made me feel like myself. The private room was at the end of a gray stone corridor, with a U-shaped table as I had requested, enough seats for 10 people, and no one sitting higher than anyone else. I placed printed documents in 3 labeled folders at my seat: finances, surveillance, and affair evidence. The first to arrive was Elisa with her boyfriend. She met my eyes, gave a small nod, and sat beside me. Then came Ellie, then Patricia, then each name from Dinner Confidential. None late, none asking me a thing. When Margaret Jackson's mother walked in, she wore a soft pearl-colored suit. Her eyes narrowed slightly when she saw me seated at the center. I nodded to invite her in. She didn't speak, only sat down with quiet scrutiny. At almost exactly 7 o'clock the door opened again. Jackson walked in wearing a slate gray suit, his posture steady like it was a high-end birthday dinner. Beside him was Tiffany, the brown-haired woman who had once laughed on my bed just 2 weeks ago. She hesitated when she saw the room. Jackson didn't. His eyes scanned the table, recognized each face, and for the first time, I saw him take half a step back. "Faith," he said, his voice still as soft as always when trying to regain control, "what is this?" I pointed to the 2 empty seats across from me. "Please, have a seat. You too, Tiffany." No one spoke as the server brought water, pouring each glass as if this were an ordinary gathering. No hands reached for the glasses. The silence between us stayed intact. "Tonight," I began, "I'm not speaking to get sympathy. I'm speaking for clarity. In front of everyone, because what happens in the dark eventually needs to be seen in the light." I slid the first folder to the center of the table. Finances. For the past 3 years, Jackson has quietly moved money from our joint account into investment funds under his name only. The house we currently live in is legally titled only to him, even though I contributed over 50% of the purchase price. This contract here is an updated version of our prenuptial agreement, one I never approved, yet it's been prepared to strip nearly all of my legal rights in the event of a divorce. Jackson's mother went rigid. Tiffany looked at him, clearly hearing this for the first time. Jackson didn't react, only murmured, "You've been spying on me?" "No," I said, opening the second folder. "You've been spying on me. This is a report from a tech specialist confirming surveillance software was installed on my phone and devices, accessing my location, texts, and schedule for at least 18 months, all traced back to an iCloud account you control." A loud, "Oh my God," came from Patricia's side. Ellie glared at Jackson, looking ready to slap him with the documents. "Back then, I thought your constant presence meant you cared. Turns out, it was control." Jackson started, "You're making this up." I raised my hand and laid down the final folder. "Affair evidence. You and Tiffany, since at least last March. Messages, photos, flight tickets, hotel bills. I didn't print everything, because I still have some respect for myself." Tiffany clutched her purse, cheeks flushed red, but didn't leave. Jackson's mother turned to her. "Tiffany, you told me you met Jackson in August." The girl fumbled, didn't answer. Jackson tried to keep a calm face, but the corners of his mouth were tight. I sat down. "Tonight? I'm not asking anyone to take my side. But I need witnesses. Because I refuse to leave this marriage as if I'm the one at fault. Jackson curled his lips. You think bringing everyone here will humiliate me enough to accept all your terms? Masks don't fall when someone gets caught. Masks fall when no one believes in them anymore. Across the table, his mother, who had always stayed neutral, spoke in a voice soft but firm. Jackson, I'm disappointed. And I think it's time you take responsibility. For the first time, Jackson didn't argue. Didn't reach for charm or excuses. His eyes met mine, and for once, he had nothing left to say. Margaret was a discreet woman from a generation that believed in saving face and never airing dirty laundry. But her tone that evening, low, slow, and unwavering, silenced the room. Even Jackson. Tiffany lowered her head, lips pressed tight. But Margaret's eyes shifted toward her, no longer with polite restraint but with the sternness of a mother who would not tolerate being lied to. Tiffany, she asked, you told me you met Jackson after the Tucson seminar. In August, so what about the messages from March? Tiffany opened her mouth to say something, then stopped. Her eyes darted toward Jackson, silently pleading. Jackson didn't argue. Didn't reach for charm or excuses. His eyes met mine, and for once, he had nothing left to say. Margaret tilted her head, waiting. Tiffany inhaled deeply, then whispered so softly it was barely audible. I didn't think everyone would find out this quickly. A sharp exhale came from Patricia, Jackson's ex-wife. She shook her head slightly and said, You thought that too, didn't you? Tiffany froze. I set the folder down and slowly stood up. I used to be you, I said directly to Tiffany. I thought I was the chosen one. I thought Jackson was the only man who truly saw my worth. You know what comes next? He'll start telling you what to wear, who to be friends with, and why your choices need to be reconsidered. And you'll think it's love. Until you realize you're being suffocated. Tiffany turned away without replying. But her lips trembled, and I couldn't tell whether it was from anger or from seeing her own future laid bare, just a few years ahead. At that moment the door opened again. Everyone turned. The man who entered walked slowly but with composure. I got to my feet and spoke calm and clear. This is Mr. Franklin Dunn. He's the father of Eliza Dunn, Jackson's first wife. Jackson stiffened, eyes widening. What are you doing here? Mr. Dunn pulled a thick file from his briefcase, set it down beside me, and sat. I'm here to do what I should have done 10 years ago. I opened the file and flipped to the first page. Stamped across the cover. Confidential. Court sailed. This is a copy of the divorce file between Jackson and Eliza. Documents that the court agreed to seal at Jackson's request. But Mr. Dunn was the one who submitted the evidence. And he kept the originals. Jackson shot to his feet. That's sealed material. You don't have the right. We're in a private gathering, I interrupted, and my attorney confirmed this doesn't breach any laws. Mr. Dunn turned to Margaret, voice calm. You once asked me why Eliza suddenly left the marriage without giving a reason, and why I always avoided your son at public events. He paused, then spoke slowly, as if carving each word into the air. Because Jackson used to track my daughter. He planted a GPS in her car, called her boss late at night to question her work hours, and tried to coerce her into signing a lopsided financial agreement, just like the one Faith presented. I gently turned the page. This is an email Eliza wrote to her lawyer, but never sent. In it she said, I'm not afraid of divorce. I'm afraid no one will believe me. Jackson is too admired, and I'm just a failed wife. Patricia closed her eyes. Jackson's mother sat stunned. She looked at the folder like she was seeing an entire part of her life rewritten. The truth had spoken for itself through evidence, memory, and the shifting stares around the table. No one said it aloud, but I knew they were all thinking it. If a man can repeat the same pattern of control and harm through multiple marriages, then what does that say about who he really is? Jackson didn't argue anymore. He sat down, silent, face pale. I had never seen him like that. As if even he hadn't expected his mask to fall so completely, so quickly. I left the Ember Room at 9:12 p.m. No one stood to walk me out, but nearly every gaze in the room followed as I stepped through the thick glass doors. Outside, the breeze was cool and open. Scottsdale at night felt gentler than I remembered. I didn't drive straight back to the hotel as planned. I wandered down the quiet road past Desert Botanical Garden, letting my thoughts drift with the faint streetlights sliding past the windows. It wasn't a victory, but it was autonomy. For the first time, I was steering my own course. Not Jackson, not anyone else's idea of the perfect wife. Not the fear of being left behind. The divorce wasn't peaceful like I had hoped. Jackson reacted exactly as Miranda predicted, denying every wrong, challenging the evidence, demanding asset division tilted in his favor. He hired a new legal team and tried to frame me as emotionally unstable to alter the settlement terms. His mistake was underestimating what I had prepared. Miranda countered with evidence we hadn't revealed at dinner. Hidden investment accounts under other names, records of illegal transfers of company shares to friendly partners, and an audio recording of Jackson threatening me to sign the new agreement or risk everything going public. That recording was made a week after the dinner at the Ember Room when he showed up at my short-term rental and slipped back into the old tone I knew too well. Sweet, coercive, sugar-coated threats. I didn't respond. I just placed my phone on the table. Once that recording was submitted, Jackson's legal team went completely silent. The divorce lasted 4 months. I was awarded a portion of the assets I never dared to dream of at the start, including shared investment holdings, a substantial cash settlement to start over, and the house, which Jackson was forced to sell after losing credit lines from his close financial partners. Margaret, his mother, did not appear at the final hearing, but I received a handwritten letter from her, brief, in careful script. Faith, at one point I thought you were too quiet. Now I realize you were someone who knew when to stay silent and when to speak. Thank you for showing me who my son really is. Margaret. Jackson wasn't criminally charged, but his reputation at the real estate firm collapsed. After the scandal involving illegal surveillance and the released records from 2 divorces, 3 major clients pulled out of the project. His primary partner refused to advance him to an executive position. Last I heard, he'd taken a job at a small firm in Colorado. This time not in charge. And Tiffany? After that dinner, she disappeared from every social media platform. A mutual contact in the industry told me she moved back in with her mother in Utah. Her role at the company branch was reassigned. No clear reason given. I didn't hate her, honestly. I just felt sorry. Because I had been her once, and it took me over a decade to see it. I used part of the settlement to buy a small condo in Fountain Hills. Not big, not luxurious, but it had a balcony facing the mountains, a kitchen with good light, and most importantly, every decision in that space was mine. I also changed careers, no longer the CFO of a major hospital chain. Now I work as an independent advisor for nonprofit organizations in public health. Less money, less prestige, but more peace. I keep in touch with Eliza and Ellie more often. We gather at the old cafe on the last Saturday of each month, chatting about anything and everything. But what matters is this. During those conversations, I no longer need permission to be myself. One afternoon in June, while watering my cactus on the balcony, my phone buzzed with a new email. It was from a public health group in New Mexico inviting me to speak at a conference on recovery after controlling relationships. I read the message, sat down and looked out toward the distant mountains. That day, I once sat in my car, in the rain, thinking I had lost everything. I stopped trying to get my old life back. What matters now is the one I'm building, with my own hands, on my own terms. On Monday morning, I woke at 6:30, like usual, but not to make breakfast for someone else, or to squeeze in emails before a meeting. I woke to the sunlight seeping through the thin white curtains I had chosen myself, in my cozy 8th-floor apartment, where every detail reflected me, and no one else. I poured a cup of black coffee, added a dash of cinnamon, and stepped onto the balcony. Fountain Hills mornings are always breezy and cool, with the Superstition Mountains faint along the horizon. I no longer wore a smartwatch to track sleep. My sleep didn't need metrics anymore, only peace. My laptop sat open on the small glass table in the living room corner, now my home office. I wasn't a hospital CFO anymore. After I resigned, I became a strategic consultant for several independent health organizations, choosing projects based on purpose, not job title or nameplates. At first, some former colleagues asked, why would you give it all up when you were at the top of your career? I didn't give it up. I chose what was truly mine. Sometimes, I look back on those days, when every step I took had to be measured through someone else's gaze, when every word had to be filtered so it wouldn't make him uncomfortable. Now, if I want to send emails at 11 p.m. or turn off my phone for an afternoon walk through the cactus garden, I do. No permission, no explanations. Each month, Elisa, Ellie, and I host a freedom brunch, no schedule, no dress code, just three women, who once lived behind glass walls, now laughing freely in the sunlight with cold mimosas in hand. Patricia sometimes joins us. We're not close friends, but there's a deep understanding between us, the kind that only comes from surviving the same silence. I still keep in touch with Jackson's mother, Margaret. Oddly enough, she's the only person from his family who still checks in on me. The oldest one, once seen as neutral, she called me a few months after the divorce, her voice soft and slow. You know, Faith, some men use quietness as a mask for control, but you used quietness to survive. I didn't say anything then, but I cried after hanging up. One April afternoon, I stopped by a plant shop to buy a few pots for my windowsill. The owner was a man in his 40s named Ben, with a gentle smile and calm way of speaking. We talked about keeping plants alive through the Arizona summer, then about the best soil for succulents. Before I left, he handed me a note. If you need help planting these, I'm free Saturday afternoon. I took the note, but I didn't message right away. That night, I laid the note on my kitchen counter, brewed a cup of chamomile tea, turned on some jazz, and asked myself, what do I want? Not what should I do? What do I want? And in the quiet of that little apartment, where there were no heavy male footsteps on the hardwood floor, no monitored emails, no meals needing to suit someone's taste, I knew I had reached a place I once thought didn't exist. Freedom. Faith's story is not just about leaving a controlling marriage. It's a powerful reminder that freedom isn't something granted. It's something claimed. From a woman silenced by appearances and perfection, Faith stood up, chose a new life, and finally lived the way she never dared to before, without fear and without asking permission. What do you think about Faith's journey and how she reclaimed her freedom? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more moving, meaningful stories about family and resilience.